Hello, and welcome back to the Sensory Play Space podcast. I'm your host, Euni, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite topics: intimacy, pleasure, and play. I love this topic so much so that I have a signature class and workshop experience that I have designed and have been facilitating for the last 3 years, specifically around this topic. So, I I wanted to take a little bit of time to break it down with you and explore and expand the perspective of what intimacy, pleasure, and play really is at heart beyond any preconceived notions or expectations, judgments, fears, or anything that kind of feels sticky when you hear those words. This came to surface for me because I had taken a break from teaching publicly, from facilitating classes and sharing my work externally, in a very organized way. And I, at the beginning of the year, kind of started navigating back into holding space in that way. Two things to know about me: I really, really, really love teaching and I really love learning. And I think these two go really hand in hand because the more I learn, the more I want to share. And so being able to really explore and study and dissect information and then translate that into not only information to share with you all, but also integrative practices, bringing that information into actions, into the body, into ways that you and I and all of us individually and collectively can kind of noodle into it and rework it in a way that it becomes our own is something that feels really exciting and really juicy and really powerful for me. And so, really, at the heart of intimacy, pleasure, and play for me has always been a space to create exploration and connection and to experiment with pushing our edges, understanding what our boundaries are, and really moving into a way of living more presently and living more embodiedly with where we're at in a moment in time. And so I think that what comes up for me a lot whenever I am naturally navigating through the normalcies of everyday life, interacting with people out in out in the wild, in the normal aspects of society, whether that be, working at my corporate job or just like interacting with people on the streets outside of these contained spaces where people are a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more possibly sex positive or sex curious, and where people like in the spaces where people have perhaps done less exploration or less self connection or self work. When I say the word intimacy, there's this slight or dramatic recoil, right? When I say pleasure, that provokes some sort of thought process that leads towards something that is perhaps provocative or a little bit like maybe fearful or a space for like fear or shame to kind of like surface. And whenever I say play, it seems that these words individually and collectively bring up a lot for people, um, in the spaces of what is not being said and what is existing within the mind. And so I want to break down some things. So here in the spaces that I hold, the spaces that I create, the ways that I write, the ways that I share information, my intention and my goal and what I'm really doing here is creating space for directness, for intentionality, for bravery, for curiosity, for connection, for deeper honesty and for exploration of what is existing beneath the surface. And so, in this combination of words, in this format of workshop, in the class that's held, whenever I'm speaking of intimacy, pleasure, and play, there is nothing underlying, right? So, let's get direct. Let's be specific and let's expand what these words can mean and what I mean when I say intimacy, pleasure, and play. So, whenever I'm looking at the word intimacy, which is a root foundation to all of the work that I do, it is how I show up in the world, it is how I share information, it's how I share myself. It's connected to path and purpose that I'm living, as well as the expressions that I want to expand. And so, whenever I say intimacy, intimacy by definition for me means a practice of presence. It also is an explored and embodied vulnerability. And so, intimacy, if I'm looking at intimacy in its purest form from my most authentic meaning, intimacy is purely a practice of presence. It is a space, it is an intention, it is a desire to become more present in this exact moment, moment to moment to moment, and to give space to whatever may unfold. When I say it is an explored and embodied vulnerability, what I mean by that is intimacy and vulnerability truly go hand in hand. We can have moments that are intimate, and we can have many moments that are intimate, but intimacy takes time. And the time that unfolds intimacy comes from the ability to move into and to feel and to navigate vulnerability in an expressed way. So, intimacy can happen mentally, right? We can have emotional intimacy, we can have mental stimulation, we can connect with someone or something in an intimate way through our mind, but intimacy is truly an embodied experience. It is an expression of our body, of our sensations, of the language that exists inside of us that is not purely controlled or contained or directed by the thoughts. And so both can exist and both do exist and both need to exist in order for us to really open up and expand, both mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. But intimacy, as we go deeper into it, is really an explored and embodied vulnerability. And the explored and embodied pieces are really important because those things come from a practice of presence. We can only explore truly to find the answers, to experience the intimacy when we are being present in the moment, when we are able to feel into our body, to feel into the expressions, the sensations, the nuances, the shifts, the changes, the subtleties. That is what creates depth. That is what creates presence, and that is what creates vulnerability, which leads us into true intimacy. So, whenever we look at pleasure, pleasure is an embodied joy. It's a felt sensation, a stimulation, and an opening to create room for more. Pleasure is something that we feel. It's not something that we think, right? We can have pleasant thoughts, we can have pleasant memories, but even in that thought process, even in that remembrance, what is happening is we are feeling. And pleasure frequently begins and exists within our heart space. And that happens because we are feeling into our body. We're opening and creating space for sensation, for stimulation. We're making room for more. So pleasure is truly an embodied joy. We often talk about seeking happiness or, kind of creating that live life, live, laugh, love, like molding experiences that evoke. And the evoking that we're truly seeking is joy. And joy is strongly connected to pleasure. I believe that they're interwoven, and joy is something that comes from the body. It comes from the heart. It comes from the space of really feeling the sensations. So we create that intimate connection. We open up, we become present, right? We are right here, right now, in the moment, seeing, witnessing, hearing, feeling, allowing space for sensation, for stimulation, for connection. And through that, we create this result, which is an expression of joy, which leads us into pleasure. And then we have play, right? So play is a space for curiosity. It's an embodied expression and creativity. Or perhaps it is an embodied expression that is creativity or of creativity. um, Play is a space for curiosity. So one of the most exciting things to me about play is the ability to understand and hold and explore fantasy. Play comes from a place of openness, right? So we have embodied that joy, we have felt sensation, we are understanding stimulation, we're opening the heart because we have moved into a practice of presence. We have explored and embodied vulnerability, and this allows us to express outwardly. Play is an outward expression. It is a navigation of our creativity. It is taking those thoughts and bringing them into the body, right? So our fantasies are mental, perhaps they're emotional, they're pictures that live in our mind. And whenever we bring them down into the body, they become play. So play is an embodied expression. It is creative. It is connective. It is present. It is joyous. It is pleasureful. So if we look at these three pieces, intimacy, pleasure, and play, they all entangle and they weave together to create presence, to create expression and experiences, to create feeling, and to create connection. So all in all, whenever we are exploring intimacy, pleasure, and play, what we're really seeking to experience or to achieve, what our intention truly at the deepest level is to create a space and to accept or to extend an invitation for connection with self, another, and the world outside of us. And so through this, what exists? The thing that happens in spaces that I hold is spaciousness for your own truth, for discovery of what is authentic for you. And what happens frequently is people come into spaces for intimacy, pleasure, or play looking for a format and a formula designed by someone else outside of them. People come into these places looking for someone to tell them how to feel, how to experience, how to exist. They look for a model or a mold to shape the way that they move and navigate presence and joy and creativity. But the truth of this all is that no one can tell us how to feel because feeling is deeply personal. And feeling comes from self. It comes from self connection. And so, if we're truly seeking to understand, to experience, to explore connection, if we want to embody and experience more intimacy, pleasure, and play, we have to come to a place of really deepening the ways in which we become vulnerable, curious, connected with ourselves. And this is where intimacy, pleasure, and play really become juicy, right? We can keep it into boxes and containers that are simplistic, that are easy to understand, that give us validation or information or even instant gratification. But if we're truly seeking to live a deeper, more expansive, more explored, more embodied life, we are not looking for intimate moments. We are seeking to become more intimate, which means we are seeking to really embody more pleasure, which means we are seeking to become more playful. And this can be experienced and expressed and explored in a variety of modalities in so many places in so many ways. And something that I've been doing over the last few years is teetering between exploring intimacy, pleasure, and play in spaces that are purely platonic, and also looking at spaces that are designed to create expansion within one's sexual energy and the ways in which people connect through their sexual expression. So, what I want to talk about here today, because the way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything, so they say, and it seems to prove in parts to have some sort of truth. But if we want to have, if our goal, if our intention, if our desire, if the path that we're moving towards is to become more embodied in our sexuality, to become more connected to a partner through our sexual experiences, one of the things that we must do is understand how to embody our intimacy, our expression, our connection, our pleasure, our play in everything that we do. It is not something that is compartmentalized or contained, but the ways in which we express can be, right? So intimacy, pleasure, and play are not compartmentalized. They are embodied within us. And the more that we practice this, the more we become it. And so, what I want to kind of plant a seed of before we wrap up here today is how can we begin exploring these things while taking out the pressure of our sexuality, of our sexual expression, of our sexual, physical, intimate space, and really expand our intimacy into everything that we do. And the ways that I have been studying and feeling and experimenting with doing this have been through really learning how to exist within my body in more expressive and creative ways. And so there's quite a few ways that you can do this, but I want to share with you a few things that I've been studying and exploring both in my own actions as well as witnessing others. And I want to plant these seeds with you. And I would love to hear what you think. So, some experienced and expressed forms of intimacy, pleasure, and play. These things that I'm going to list off and kind of like just tap into have been really curious for me. One, because witnessing people that really return to these practices as a ritual or as a hobby or as like a part of their identity holds something really special and something really almost like luminescent. It has a draw and it has an attraction. And I believe that part of that draw and attraction for people observing as well as the people doing is that it is such a practice of being in the body and expressing and feeling joy and experimenting with creativity in the exact moment, where these pieces have formats and formulas to get you started, but really each and every single moment of navigating this experience and expression is unique, which is really, I think, one of the most accessible and simple and complex ways of being present. So, non sexual intimacy, pleasure, and play, and looking at how it is experienced and expressed through some existing formats and methods and modalities, right? So something that is really curious for me that I love, that is a little bit of my Achilles heel and kryptonite, is circus. I love circus. I love witnessing performers. I love all of the elements and pieces of circus for the most part, right? I love witnessing people really drop into their body and pull the depths of their weird to the surface to create a show. And this is something that I have learned takes a lot of connection to self, right? It is a journey and navigation that's very, very intimate. You're continuously confronting your own insecurities and the projections of other people when you choose to perform, especially when you're choosing to perform circus, because there are stigmas, there are perspectives, there are viewpoints, and there are scripts that you are navigating and creating in the moment to evoke, to provoke, and to really challenge others to think differently. And so, circus is this way of really taking all of the dark corners of the mind, entangling them, making them into some sort of mystic, magical, artistic form, and then bringing it out expressed through the body. This happens in a variety of ways. There's a variety of types of performances, whether it be aerial arts or it be clowning, or it can be so many different things. But circus is like a huge expression of fantasy. And it happens in ways that are very subtle and very direct. And so I think that this is a place that can be studied and explored even more, regardless if you choose to navigate deeper into circus or if you just want to be a witness and an observer of it. And then there are performance arts, right? So we have things like burlesque, pole, contemporary, fire, things where people are really moving into their bodies and creating shapes and forms and patterns to express and emote and to provoke and inspire emotions and expressions and feelings. And so I feel like performance art is really a beautiful mirror towards all of the things that we perhaps want to feel, but we fear feeling. Performance arts brings us in, right? It is it is shiny, it is dark, it is experimental, it is expressive, it is this place of awe. And to really embody performance arts, it means that you are confronting and challenging and expanding the ways in which you think so that you can move with more freedom and you can become more embodied. And this is such an intimate practice, right? It is very vulnerable because we are playing with our own internal emotions and we are giving them a space to be expressed externally. But then we are also curating shapes for play and to give these emotions a fluidity that is freeing. And that translates into something beautiful, even if it's something really hard. And then we have contact and ecstatic dance, right? So, contact and ecstatic dance is this way that we create intimacy, pleasure, and play that can be expressed with others. It can be shared, it can be a shared experience because contact and ecstatic dance happens in groups, it happens with others. And it is something that we can share literally, like through physical touch, or we can share just energetically by existing within the same space. But what we're doing as we're like dropping into contact and ecstatic dance is we are really listening to the nuances and the subtleties that exist between objects, whether it be self and the ground, self and the floor, self and the wall, self and space, or it be self and another. We're looking at what we're feeling. So we're going deeper into the expressions and the language and the sensations of the body. And we're mirroring this with the things external. We are moving in a way that can be really entangled, and we are releasing the control of movement as we go. And so, as we're navigating these things, we're opening and we're expanding and we are feeling. And what often surfaces for me through ecstatic and contact dance is these bursts and releases of joy, of laughter, of pleasure, because there's nothing containing anything inside of it, right? And then we have rope bondage, right? So rope bondage is something that is a beautiful art form. I want to do rope bondage and then I'll do fire separate. But rope bondage is also something that is a very connective practice. And it is, again, like contact and ecstatic dance. It can be a deep connection with self and it can be a deep connection with something external, whether it be the atmosphere and or another person. And rope bondage creates this kind of like movement between understanding mentally shapes and patterns and technicalities, technical skills and technical pieces that create something that is safe enough to be experimented and explored with, that can create layers of trust with self and another in space. And it is something that is fluid enough that each motion, each wrap, each bond, each tie, each entanglement of rope around a limb or a part or in connection to an object really is its own experiment and exploration. And this causes and demands that we become really present, whether we are the person tying or the person being tied, whether it is something that we are feeling by applying or that we are feeling by receiving. And if we are doing this practice as a solo practice, if we are self tying, it demands that we become the most present in every single way. We are feeling and we are applying, right? We are feeling and we are applying feeling. And so it is this dance, it's this movement and this motion that becomes almost hypnotic, which is part of the like appeal. It pulls things to the surface that we did not know were existing, and it forces us to face this by surrendering control, by letting go, by submitting to being present and being aware and being in connection. Literally, we are bound. And then as we start to remove the rope, there's this release, this let go, this softening, this euphoria that comes from being so deeply present in a moment that all we could do was feel what was true. And that is joy. That is pleasure. That is intimate. That is playful. And I want to close out my examples of experienced and expressed intimacy, pleasure, and play with one of the practices and just like the skills that I find so fascinating, which is fire spinning and fire dancing. So I have a group of humans that I'm connected with, friends and peers, and just inspiring people that have dedicated their life to fire performance, fire dancing, fire spinning. And this is something that is deeply intimate. There is a magnificent amount of trust that is needed in order to not only protect and create a space of safety with self, but to also create reverence and respect to the element that is existing outside of us, which is the fire, right? And to create an environment of safety to share this with others. So, fire is something that is wild and it is uncontainable, but it is also something that will move with us if we create reverence for it, right? And so it's such an intimate practice. It's intimate, it's pleasureful, it's playful, because we really have to create a space of humility and vulnerability. We have to understand what it is to surrender and to also create containment in a way that is open, because fire moves and it shapes and it shifts and it bends, and we move with it versus us moving it per se, because fire is moving on its own. And so it becomes this hypnotic experience that is a rhythm and a flow. Fire dancing and fire performing and fire spinning really is, there's no formula, right? We learn patterns so that we can move with the element. But really, when fire dancing becomes the most beautiful and the most experienced, is when a performer is deeply embodying presence and they are witnessing and responding to the fire in motion. They're not controlling the way that the fire is going. They're really following what the fire is calling them towards. And this is play. So I wanted to just like take a moment to drop in with you and share some of these things that were on my mind and in my heart. Um, I think that it is so frequent that we hear words and we create assumptions. And from those assumptions, we not only create contractions and containments and limitations on ourselves, but we limit the experiences that others around us are able to have and to share with us. So, I guess my take home for you are a few things, right? One, how can you create more openness for curiosity so that you can really navigate into more moments of intimacy, pleasure, and play, regardless of how you're being guided by another? Two, I want to ask you, what does intimacy, pleasure, and play look like for you? How does it feel? What do you want to express? What do you want to experience? How do you want to explore? What is an edge that you want to move towards to understand more of yourself and to share more of what you understand with the world outside of you? And three, in which ways would you like to create experienced and expressed intimacy, pleasure, and play in your day to day life? Whether that be you adopt a new hobby, you go and witness others in theirs, or maybe it's a combination of both. Thank you for tuning in with me, and we will talk to you soon.